Okay, this is Brother Peter Diamond here with Vin Lewis, and we were going to have a debate on the issue of whether the post-Vatican II claimants to the papacy are true popes. It was going to be a serious debate with a flexible format, and we're going to let each other speak. However, if we start to talk over each other, then we'll impose, a stricter format, and if still one of us then refuses to let the other side speak, we'll have to it will be basically a concession that he can't face the facts that are being presented. And so, did you want to begin with a statement or a question?
Yeah, well, yes, two things. Number one, as I mentioned to you before, I was having phone problems, so if we cut off in the middle, I did not hang up on you, okay? And we'll try to reestablish contact, but I did have some technical problems before. One thing I would like to concede from the very beginning is that, as far as I'm concerned, in this matter, numbers mean nothing. In other words, I know that you're holding a minority view, in the sense that I think most people in the world would say that you're wrong. I think the fact that I'm on the majority side means nothing, so I'm not going to use that at all. Obviously, truth has nothing to do with democracy. And I guess my position is as follows. I have heard your position, not necessarily from you, but from others, expressed in various different ways, and I've never found them to be convincing. And I hold the following. You have to convince people that your position is correct. You can't simply cannot simply assert it. In other words, what you're doing is accusing certain people, in essence, of sort of a theological crime, and I say that the burden of proof is upon you. Those are the premises on which I operate. I just figured I'd simply clear that up to begin with.
Okay, and I would respond by saying that the strongest argument and the irrefutable argument that the post-Vatican II claimants are not popes is the fact that they're not Catholic. And the evidence for that is so overwhelming. I mean, I could literally just focus on one aspect of it. I could focus on their teaching vis-a-vis Islam, or their teaching vis-a-vis the Schismatic Orthodox, or their teaching vis-a-vis Protestants, or their teaching vis-a-vis the Jews. And you could literally prove the point just by focusing on that, but I'm not going to focus on one. I'll bring in a whole variety of evidence. And what people need to realize is that the Church teaches that a heretic cannot be pope. That's the official teaching of the Church. That's the teaching of the doctors of the Church who have addressed the issue, that if you are confronted with a man who claims to be the Pope, who is a public manifest heretic, he cannot be considered a Pope, because the Church is one in faith. And so someone who has severed himself from the faith of the Church by public heresy cannot remain the Pope. He automatically ceases to be the Pope. So the question really comes down to, are they heretics? And the evidence is simply irrefutable. And so I don't know if you wanted to, I could continue, or if you wanted to respond.
Let me make a brief response at this point, okay? I hold that the status of papacy is similar to the status of priesthood, and that although a person once ordained a priest may very well leave the Church, he doesn't lose his status as a priest. I also hold that the argument that number one, that the official teaching, I'm not convinced on that. I'm not going to say you're wrong. I'm simply saying I've not been convinced on it yet. The second point is that I think the evidence, I guess that would be the proper word, which is advanced to prove that, I'll use your words, the claimants to the seat of St. Peter are not Catholic, has not been convincing to me. Okay? I think that's all I really need to say at this time.
Okay, well, let me respond to that by pointing out that it's not in any way comparable to the character of the priesthood, because in baptism, holy orders, and confirmation, a person receives an indelible mark on the soul, so that that person will eternally have that mark. But with an office in the Church, you have to be a member of the Church to hold that office, and the papacy is an office in the Church. And so you lose that office when you lose membership in the Church. And that's why St. Francis de Sales, Doctor of the Church, points out in the Catholic Controversy, famous apologetic work, he says, quote, "Now when the Pope is explicitly a heretic, he falls ipso facto from his dignity and out of the Church." And St. Antonius says the same thing. In the case in which the Pope would become a heretic, he would find himself by that fact alone and without any other sentence separated from the Church. A head separated from a body cannot, as long as it remains separated, be head of the same body from which it was cut off. St. Robert Bellarmine says the same thing. It is most certain that the manifest heretic cannot be pope, and that he would lose his office if he became a manifest heretic. So it's not comparable to the indelible mark of the priesthood at all, because it requires membership in the church, whereas being a priest does not. And so I would ask you, unless you want to respond, I could ask you a question.
Again, one of the problems with an informal format is I don't wish to get bogged down on what I would consider minor points. You can ask me a question, but I still think it might be better, and you tell me if you think I'm wrong, for you to make, if that's your case in chief, as they say, it's fine, then I'll go. But if it's not, you might want to bring up more, but also ask a question. Go ahead, do that.
Okay, well, I mean, if you want me to establish more of the evidence, I'd be happy to do that now.
I'm sorry.
Whatever you prefer. You can respond.
Why don't you ask the question, because maybe that'll help.
Okay. Can one be inside the church if one does not reject and condemn justification by faith alone and the Lutheran teaching on justification?
Okay, this is something I've wrestled with a long time, and I'd love to be able to give you a simple yes or no answer. The problem is I haven't come up myself with a strong distinction between what is a heretic and what is an ex-Catholic. I'll explain to you what I mean. For a while, I held, because of improper teaching on my own spiritual sloth, an improper view on things like baptism of desire and baptism of blood. When I was straightened out, I rejected those. I was what was called a material heretic. In other words, someone who, without a conscious effort, had fallen into error on various different positions that the church holds. Now, at that point, I was, as I say, a material heretic. But at no time did I consider myself outside the church. So what I'm saying is, my definition of someone who is outside the church is someone who clearly declares himself to be so, or makes an act of will to be so. Simply being in error on something does not put someone outside the church. That's my position. I wasn't able to give you an immediate yes or no answer on that, and I hope you don't consider that an evasion. I don't know if you accept it. Let me know.
Okay, well, let me respond to that and relate it to this point, that a material heretic, as it's called, is an erring Catholic. This is a person who has not obstinately rejected any teaching of the church. This is a person who would immediately correct his position if he were confronted with the teaching of the church. Okay, it's not a person who sees the dogmatic teaching of the church and rejects it, or a person who is very familiar with the dogmatic teaching of the church and persists in positions opposed to it. So the notion that these Vatican II anti-popes, Benedict XVI, etc., are material heretics, it's a joke. I've read 25 of Benedict XVI's books. The guy is thoroughly familiar with the councils of the church, the history, he knows all about it. And the fact of the matter is, he approved the agreement with the Lutherans on justification. Okay, the Vatican Lutheran Agreement, which accepts Lutheran teaching on justification among countless other heresies he holds. And so the notion that he's unaware of this obvious teaching in the church, it's absurd. And so my question remains, well, here's another question for you. Can someone be a Catholic if he's pro-abortion or accepts those who are pro-abortion? Like Ted Kennedy. He claimed to be Catholic. He didn't officially say, I'm a Protestant. So he was pro-gay marriage, pro-abortion. Was he Catholic or not?
I don't. Now, I certainly dislike Ted Kennedy, okay? And I believe, heavy emphasis on the word believe, that he was not a Catholic in any meaningful sense of the word whatsoever. I believe that he rejected the church a long time ago. But that's my belief. What I'm saying is, and I guess this really gets to the heart of the matter, is I believe that it is improper to make judgments on the souls of other people unless we have, I would say, irrefutable evidence. Now, once again, I never heard of Ted Kennedy denouncing the church, so what I would call him is a very, very bad Catholic. Can a person be a Catholic and be pro-abortion? Yeah, absolutely. The reason is that I myself have confessed to murder a whole bunch of times. Not that I intentionally ever killed anyone illegally, but I definitely wished the death of other people on numerous occasions. Abortion and murder, as far as I'm concerned, are really essentially the same. I've confessed to those sins. I hope to heck I've been forgiven them. But I never got outside the church. What I'm saying is a sinful person remains in the church until or unless, and this is my opinion, he makes some kind of act of will or formal renunciation. Even habitual sin, even scandalous sin, does not put a person outside the church unless he does that act of will. And this is my key point, is that even if a person... hang on, I'll switch phone and go ahead and comment. I'm moving the phone back and forth, so go ahead and